It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And it is your real estate breakfast right across Australia, talking property from South Yarra in Melbourne through to Glenelg in Adelaide. And good morning to wherever you're listening to us from across Australia or around the world with our ever-expanding audience, especially expats who are thinking about moving back home. It is a Thursday, April the 16th. Now, a couple of days ago, we were talking about Josh Tesselin's 10-year ban from the real estate industry. And good morning to you, Nathan. Thank you for your email. You have emailed in saying that you were intrigued about the fact that Tesselin is still training and mentoring agents, including many new agents with possibly stars in their eyes who look up to him and his methods. You go on to say that Tesselin will still be profiting off and have his fingerprints all over the industry that he is banned from. Nathan, it's an interesting situation. It's an interesting point that you raise because on one hand, the ban clearly prevents his involvement in operating or managing a real estate business following these serious findings. On the other hand, it appears that there may still be scope to coach or mentor from outside the licensed environment. While it may sit within the rules, is it consistent with the intent of the ban? This does bring the spotlight onto principals and real estate owners across the industry who ultimately, let's face it, they shape the next generation of agents in Australia. Their role in guiding young professionals, including who they learn from and model themselves on, is critical. And at a time like this, the industry will likely look inwards with experienced leaders setting the tone around standards, ethics and professionalism. And in many ways, it becomes a collective responsibility to ensure emerging agents are being influenced by the right voices moving forward, which by the sound of it, Nathan, is your area of concern. And I hope that that in some way answers your question. Now, if you've got a comment to make, we have that voice recorder below, which is very easy to use, or you can email us at myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. Well, right now, let's go to Brisbane because we're going to catch up with Grace Hugh. She is the principal from Square Real Estate. And good morning, Grace. Welcome on to the Real Estate Breakfast for the very first time. As I say, you're in Brisbane, but you are a principal and you're in the business of training these new real estate agents. So what did you make of that email that came through?
Good morning, Craig. Thank you for having me. I'd like to say something about when we're training new people, we see the professional level to be a higher level compared to other industry. We like to work with people who are genuinely being in a helpful position to assist those people who really need this kind of professional advice.
There seems to be a growing view that parts of Brisbane's housing market haven't yet caught up with the broader price surge. Something I want to talk to you about is there's a shift towards this mid-tier suburbs around Brisbane, and we're talking in the $1.4 million bracket.
Yeah, as you can see from the most recent report, the mixture of housing median price is at 1.1, but housing in some suburbs already about 1.4, which is my understanding. The population has been growing in the last 40 years of Queensland, especially Brisbane. 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, when my friend come over from China, she said, oh, let's go traveling around Australia. And we went to Cairns, we went to Gold Coast. We skipped Brisbane because we didn't know about it. Now, because Olympic is approaching and Brisbane's getting more and more famous, and people say, let's stop by at Brisbane, see what's going on there. Queensland also have a very good policy to attract all the skillful people. So they're moving here, living here temporarily, and then decide Brisbane is the right city for them for the rest of life. So as you can see, the population change in ABS September 2025, the figure is showing the net interstate to Queensland is 19,000 something, which means people even within Australia, they like to move to Queensland, especially Brisbane greater area to live in. Things are happening.
Yes, it's certainly happening in Brisbane, that is for sure. You're in the right location. Now, rate hikes, they seem to be cutting borrowing capacity, potentially up to almost $60,000 this year, raising concerns about the affordability and over-leveraging, especially for first-home buyers. This is an area we've been talking about for some time. What are you seeing in terms of the people you're dealing with in that space?
Well, 4.1 cash rate is relatively high compared to a few years ago. But as a real estate expert, I looked the figures over 50 years, 30 years. Not sure if you remember, there's a hike, really spike high mortgage rate in 1980s, and towards 1990s was 17%, 21%. Like over time, when we look at long-term thing, it's not horrible, but it's definitely affecting people's decisions. For example, when we put someone into a rental property and we sometimes value their income percentage towards the housing. Initially, I think 10 years ago, we were seeing lots of 20%, 30% towards the rent. However, now you've seen lots of even high income families are paying 40% towards 45% to the household, which is something has been changed. Apparently, the salary hasn't been caught up, but if the salary caught up, everything will be increased, which means inflation will be horrible, which means the government will increase the cash rate again. So they all kind of in the same string. It just depends on how do we understand it. I often say to my client, sit down and do your own calculation, see if you could afford it. However, this is not going to change their long-term plan. So it really depends. They take action now or take action later. It depends on that person, really.
We are talking to Grace. She is in Brisbane. When we come back, interesting, we're going to do some price comparison between the Sunshine Coast and Brisbane.
Decode the property market with insider knowledge and insights to better navigate your real estate journey.
And right now it is time for another 30-second property tip. We are going to Jackson.
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to reiterate, in Queensland, when you're buying a property, make sure you pay your deposit on time. In case a lot of people didn't know, if you don't pay your deposit on time, the seller can actually terminate the contract and claim the full deposit as compensation. So really, really important that that deposit does get paid in the nominated time frame within that contract.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
Hey, it is a Real Estate Thursday. Grace is with us from Brisbane. Time to have a look at some price comparisons here. This is median pricing between the Sunshine Coast and Brisbane. Let's have a look at first the Sunshine Coast. Median house price between $950 and that 1.1 million range. The median unit price, 650K to 800K. Strong premium sales. That is the point about the Sunshine Coast at the moment. Brisbane's median house price, as Grace mentioned, around that $1.2 million mark. Median unit price between 7 and 800K. So yes, there is definitely a saving to be had if you want to move from Brisbane into the Sunshine Coast. Is that what you're seeing with some people that you're talking to there, Grace, in Brisbane?
Yes, for sure. People are looking at properties initially house because that's the Australian lifestyle. However, when the house is not affordable, people are start looking at townhouse, apartment unit. And bear in mind, when you're living in a townhouse or apartment or unit, you're facing every year body corporate fee as well. However, when people is borrowing a capacity lower than the past time, and people are looking at something under 1 mil or 1 mil mark house, and this will be limited their options from house to townhouse, even to the old type of unit. And sometimes when this house style sacrifice is not enough, people will be thinking about sacrifice the location. So people wouldn't mind living further towards Brisbane CBD because in some companies, even in my building, they are working from home for 2 days every week. It's kind of a common thing. So living on the Gold Coast, on the Sunshine Coast, or even somewhere in between, it's doable.
And yeah, just on the apartment side, as we say, Sunshine Coast, obviously cheaper than Brisbane, as is the Gold Coast, maybe only just. So Brisbane is facing this serious apartment shortage. It's something that we're talking about constantly, with some areas holding just 1 month of supply. So it's getting pretty tight, isn't it, in the apartment market?
So we would like to see how much apartment is going to be approved in the next few years. So short-term wise, yes, we are in shortage. And in the long term, I've seen some areas open to more high density properties. Brisbane and Brisbane Ring area still have plenty of potentials of doing so. That's my personal opinion. And yes, also, we are in an era that generations are changing. You know, the main lifestyles kind of changing. When the younger generation growing up, they're probably not like the gardening job anymore, or less percentage of people enjoy living in a big household. They're more kind of gym people. They like to have a gym in their apartment. And as I mentioned, location is not vital anymore since you can work a few days from home and some people working from the home entirely. It's good to see that people are moving towards where they could afford, and the balance up the whole market is a very good thing to see at this very moment.
Yes, indeed. All right, some great takeaways there, Grace. Thank you so much for joining us from Brisbane this morning on the Real Estate Breakfast, and enjoy your Thursday.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks for your time, and thank you for having me.
If you're a new listener, welcome. We talk to the most knowledgeable real estate experts across Australia every day from 6 a.m.
Looking at the unit, that really does tell a completely different story. Annual growth, 20.8%. There's a big contrast, isn't there, between those two asset classes?
Well, here we are in a booming market, yet you can't make too many apartment developments stack up at all from a feasibility point of view because the costs are still higher than the end value. So get that. That's an unusual period. I've never seen a real estate boom when you can't make developments stack up.
Well, just on that, in terms of developers, how much of a ongoing problem with the developers that you're talking to at the moment is that?
Yeah, well, people have got the capital and the appetite to develop. We've got a housing shortage and a shortage of properties available for sale. We've got plenty of buyer demand. The developers want to develop, but just can't get, a lot of the feasibilities to stack up. We're still probably between 5 and 15% away in some instances.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.